When you're in like the integrative, naturopathic, and alternative world, it's kind of a small world, right? Because I've known of you for a while now and followed your work and even seen you speak, of course, before at Body Electric. And we both recently spoke at the Lyme, and everything's virtual, so we didn't actually meet at the event. But it was amazing to cross paths, and you do that a lot in this industry. But I'd love to hear your story of how you even got into the naturopathic and integrative medicine field. So give us your story. How'd you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I, grew up in a family of medicine. I grew up on the East Coast outside of DC, and my father is actually an oncologist, and my mother is in nursing and nursing education. And she worked at a hospital with quality and education. And I was always around it and always kind of dabbled with the idea of being a doctor and loved biology and all that good stuff. And then I went to the University of Virginia. And during that time, I was really still, East Coast, as you live on the East Coast, so really, battling like that. Should I become a medical doctor or a naturopathic doctor? And this was still, very much, I think, it was starting to gain traction, but still very, not mainstream at all. And so I had some really interesting events. You look back and see how the seeds are planted right on your timeline. And, my mom had a good friend who had a cancer diagnosis, and she found somebody who went to Bastyr. So that was the first time I had heard of Bastyr. And I was really excited about that there even existed the field of naturopathic medicine. And then when I was at UVA, I went to a course on complementary and alternative medicine, and a naturopath taught that course. And one of the speakers was actually Dr. Jerry Tennant. And so that was back in like early 2000s. And he really planted a seed in my brain about energy medicine. And many of you might know his story, but he was one of the first doctors who did the LASIK surgery. And so he potentially had a viral exposure through his eyes that got into his brain. And he had debilitating chronic fatigue for about 13 years. And what changed the course was a instrument called the scanner, which worked on basically polarity and this concept of negative and positive charge in the body and recognizing viruses through that, or mounting an immune response through that. And so that was really pivotal, just, hearing that story. And so my path led me to Bastyr. And honestly, I was one of the youngest people in the program at that time. I was 22. I moved across the country, and it was a big culture shock. You think about health, and then you're, in Seattle, which was very different from Virginia, and Bastyr was very different. And I still had that inner conflict if this is the right path or not for me. And I did something very out of character. And I decided to take a year off, and that year became 2 years. And in that time, I had this, again, incredible journey, and I met incredible people along the way that just led me back to naturopathic medicine. And, I did an event with like Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Ray, and, learned about mercury in the mouth. And, I even, took the MCAT, just getting really close up to that, possibility. And in that moment, I was like, this is not, for me. And so I found my way back to Bastyr. And one of the first lectures during that time was with Louisa Williams. Do you know her? She wrote a book called Radical Medicine. And if anyone out there wants to learn, probably the conversation we're going to have more and more, it's like the textbook of, I think, the medicine we both practice. And it talks a lot about bioregulatory medicine and the concept of interference fields and the dental connection and, all of these things. And I just remember sitting in that class, and she was like, what is the first thing that you do when you have a patient walk in your room? And we're like, oh, ask them if they eat gluten or, whatever we're thinking. And she's like, you look in their mouth. And that just really struck me. And she was a very influential mentor in my life. And so kind of everything was all timing for me. So I came back to Bastyr, and everything just fell into place. I had wonderful mentors. I, really had a wonderful experience. And then after graduation, I had a lot of opportunity to really dive in and study bioregulatory medicine. And here we are 12 years later. And, it's just, we're in that paradox, right? That even though things are becoming more censored and more polarized and everything, there's also this opportunity to share these conversations that we're having way more than when I graduated. So that gives me great hope that we are, we're getting there. We're getting there on really sharing with people the real reasons why they're sick and giving them tools. And I know that we share a passion, and how can we shorten that time, for people to get the proper diagnosis or whatever, we want to call it. And then, really, I still feel very much that we're in a quest to finding the more elegant path to healing, because I think we know a lot and we have a lot of great tools, but I'm still not satisfied as how long it still takes people to get better. And so that really propelled me on a path to look at biophysics and, study, the whole energy medicine perspective, because I think that integration with what we would call biofield science with, functional medicine or bioregulatory medicine or whatever we want to call it. I think that's the future of medicine that I'm really passionate on learning about, sharing with my patients, and really creating a conversation about. So that's a long-winded story of where I got.
No, I mean, it's your story. It's not long-winded. That's great. And I think it's so true. And I find this, across lots of doctors I speak with, it's like you start going down one path and you find yourself on another. And that's the beauty of medicine. It is a dynamic science. It is constantly evolving and changing. This idea that there's one right way of going about medicine is like bonkers to me. It's like there's only one way to go about life. It's just make money. You know how many people are miserable on that path, right? Because it's not the only path. Maybe for some, that's their path. Mm-hmm. But, when I hear you talk about this with bioregulatory, with going more on the quantum field sort of side of thing, that excites me, because that's kind of looking at medicine as a whole, as that holistic side. And I think functional medicine has done a great job of moving us away from conventional, integrating lifestyle nutrition, doing a lot of great things to take us into a more comprehensive approach of healing. But it's still, to me, there's a lot to go. You could keep going. It's not like functional and stop there. Mm-hmm. And, you brought up Jerry Tennant, who, healing voltage is healing, and this idea. What do you think? Do you think we're getting there now, where functionals kind of hit this, I think it's gotten quite large, and everyone knows a functional doctor, and there's like Parsley Health everywhere and all these places you can go to that are very functionally based. Do you think we're now at this precipice where it's going to keep moving towards energy, which you found yourself, but I find many doctors still aren't quite grasping?
Yeah, I do. I feel in my heart, I know that our medical system continues to go through a healing crisis, and, we can look at that. And I do think that it's going to allow the opening for us to have these conversations with quantum biology and, biophysics and energy medicine more and more. And I applaud the functional medicine movement. I absolutely do. I'm grateful for them. They did a way better job than my naturopathic profession on moving the needle and getting this conversation, to mainstream. And, I think you see this too, right? The people that often land in our office have done all of that, right? And they're still not in a state of health, and they're not in a state of resolution that they're able to move on with their life, that they're still very much struggling in their physical body. So that, I guess that's my path to continue to inquire about why, when you're doing the right things, the best supplements, the best diet, all the best physical things, why are some people not getting better? And so that's been my path to ask those questions. And I'm sure you're well aware of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and that world has been really inspiring for me, especially over the last year. I had a patient who I basically, she ended up seeing my colleague more, but we were in communication, and she was very, very sick. She had mast cell activation syndrome, and, we know what that means, like very reactive. You're constantly in stress and anxiety and fear about your environment because you're so sensitive, and you're very physically, harmed by many substances. And so she was doing her work and doing all the things, but she was very much committed to the path of doing the meditations with Joe Dispenza. And she said that, she shared this visualization that she had of eating a chocolate croissant with her young boy in France, and she's American. And I was like, well, I'm not going to limit anything, but it was like, wow, that's a big, that's a big vision. And she showed us a picture, about a year later of that experience. And so, yes, I think what we were doing for her helped, but I think it was that synergy of those, the ability to, get in that state of coherence on a very regular basis, have that visualization of your future heal self and kind of drawing that to you. That really was the thing, right? That synergy got her to that experience. And so that planted a seed within me. And with everything going on in the last few years, I had the opportunity, I've gone to 3 events and been trying to implement more of the meditations in my life. And I just love how Dr. Dispenza bridges that world of the mystical, kind of spiritual with the science, right? And he can have a language. And I think that is the language that we want to bring forth. And he says something that really sticks with me. And to change matter with matter takes time. And I think we know how to do that, right? Functional medicine knows how to do that. And we stick it out and we get people better, right? But, the average person, if I just do matter to matter, 18 months, 2 years, really. But then he says, when you change the field, you can change matter. And so that is the inquiry that I've been in for the last, 2 years, really. And how do I really bring in tools and language around what does that mean? And how do we change the field so that we can see these opportunities to accelerate the healing path? And, it helps us to think, he talks about the root of pathologies in the field, not in the physical body. And so it takes this whole idea of root cause to like this whole other language. And why, again, I'm staying with this community and staying with this path is because, those 3 events I've been in, when you're in these events, you have these very profound experiences and you meet incredible people and you hear these stories. And I honestly, out of any medical community or conference, I've seen more miracles than, what would be quote miracles than any other community. So it has my attention. And, I really hope in my career and in my lifetime that we bring a language to this. So, definitely like empower people to really understand this and not make this big leap that they have to like distrust because it's invisible and they don't understand that, okay, this works, but really give people a language around it. And then also integrate this into the clinical model. I think we have a shared passion on how to bring this into the clinical treatment and really from the beginning empower people with this language. And like just as much as we're looking at their vitamin D levels and their co-infections and their mercury levels and their dental stuff, we're like, part of this path is that you're going to feel empowered by the end of it. And you're part of the equation, and don't ever let me not remind you of that, so yeah, that's, my, really my vision and my passion right now.
The language is so important, isn't it? And what I've realized when I speak to many doctors, sometimes it is about bridging the gap, because a lot of times when you're talking about, let's say, ancient wisdom, esoteric things, energy, quantum, you lose people. They don't know that language. I've always said, if you try speaking to someone in Chinese, even though it's wonderful information and they don't know Chinese, it goes over their head and you lose them. And they go back to what they're used to, which is English, let's say. And you could say English is the conventional approach of take this pill, you won't have symptoms, end of day, you're good, right? Or we'll just cut it out. But to bridge that gap is incredibly important. What I've realized is a lot of this kind of advanced science talk is really just what ancients use different words for. I think that's the thing, and be able to bridge that and present it in a way with analogies that connect with people, with not something that goes completely over their head, is really, really important as we move medicine forward. Because you're right, so much of medicine is in the invisible, is in the things that we can't yet quantify with many of the tools we have in conventional medicine. So that's really important. How are you bridging that gap in your practice with patients that are, I know this in our practice, very much so still in that kind of conventional old way of looking at things. Yes, they may have been exposed to meditation and Joe Dispenza, but when you start to apply, let's say, light therapies and energy medicine, that again, or even emotional things, they say, hey, just give me the IV and let's be done with this because I don't want to address my emotional trauma.
It's a great question. And, we have to meet people where they're at, right? We absolutely have to meet people where they're at. But, if they show up in your doorstep and you have all of these offerings and all this knowledge, there's a part of them that's attracted to having that experience. And it's, sometimes dripping that out. Some of my patients, I can go right there. They're ready. They understand this. They're, already in this language. And some, it might take, a year before they're open to it. And that's okay. And I'm totally open to being on that, that timeline with them. We're at I think, a unique tipping point for energy medicine too, because we are surrounded by all of this technology, right? With Wi-Fi and cell phones that I think people have, at least in their mental model, there are these invisible fields of information and energy that they might not quite understand, but we're interacting with. They know Wi-Fi, they know the cell phone tower, there's that connection. So I think even though that obviously has cost benefit to our physical bodies, and of course our energetic bodies, that I think is opening up the language for, this time. And so I like to use different terminology, and I have a mentor and a friend, Dr. Beverly Rubik, and she is a biophysicist in UC Berkeley. And I love that she was very influential in using this term biofield, because it's not aura, it's not chakra, it's not, it sounds scientific, and, it is, right? And so she was influential in putting this term biofield in PubMed in the 1990s. So it can be researched and studied. And there's a lot of research if you go into PubMed and put in biofield. And, their description has evolved about the biofield, but the biofield is this field of information and energy that surrounds the body. And I always start bridging that gap for the conventional language and the alternative language with knowing that we have, the capacity in the conventional world to measure our electromagnetic nature, right? So we very much know that our heart has a strong electromagnetic field. It is the strongest electromagnetic field in the body. And I think as you learn about energy medicine, you cannot ignore the heart, right? And the heart, it's beautiful, right? When you get really, it's complicated, but very simple, that we're wired to be in these states of love and gratitude and appreciation. And when we are, our physiology follows, and we are inherently more healthy and more regulated and, more connected. And so, the heart is, definitely we can measure through the electromagnetic nature of EKGs and things, brain waves, obviously. So there's this, conventional understanding. And then, sometimes breaking it down, there are just principles in physics, right? Whenever you have electricity, you have magnetism. And when you have magnetism, you have electricity. And we have electrolytes, and we have these, electrical charges in the body. And that's biochemistry too, right? So take a leap, and then you can know that we have this movement of charge in the body. So we, by inherent nature of the movement of electrical charge, we have electromagnetic fields. And so, once you just kind of break it down in simple terms, I think people can understand this electrical nature of the body. And then, I very much hope in my lifetime there'll be more accessible tools to look at the biophoton emissions of the body. We have, different things like Kirlian photography or the GDB cameras, or I have a BioWell in my office. And, this is this is really what excites me, the idea of light and sound and that communication in the body. And so, I just share with people that it's been, studied, obviously Dr. Fritz Albert Popp looked at biophotons, and that we are wired to basically emit and receive sound, right? So from our DNA, our DNA can emit biophotons, and we have a whole network of basically a fiber optic network in our body that responds to light transmission. And then an area that is super exciting to me is sound. And there is a biophysicist out of UCLA, like in the early 2000s. Basically, it's called sonocytology. So this the study of cell sounds. So you can measure, and hear sounds coming from cells. And just in the beauty of how we're made, that when cells are sick or dying or mutated or have cancer, they make an incoherent, dissonant sound. And then when they're healthy, they're more harmonious and coherent. And so, giving people like, those pearls, and then I feel like obviously there's, light, sound, this idea of frequency. Frequency, I think that term gets thrown around a lot, but it's obviously very much how the world works. And they're in ancient traditions, they even mapped out resonant frequencies and resonant sounds for every tissue in the body. A lot of our Eastern European, scientists have figured out technologies to measure, resonant frequencies in the body. So that idea, like every tissue has an optimal range of frequency when it's in balance, and when it's out of balance, there is stress and incoherence and pathology. And so when you think about it, the language of all of that, a lot of our job, right? Especially when people are sick, is like, how do we add more coherent information to the body so the body can then have more balanced biochemistry, so more coherent light. So that's going to be, our light therapies, more coherent sound. That's going to be our sound therapies. There's a lot of different frequency technologies that do different things, but the ones that I like, find when there's imbalance in resonant frequencies, and then add resonant frequencies to the body so that the body has the opportunity to respond, right, and regulate with that information. So I see, very much that these biofield therapies, we just miss out a huge opportunity if we're not integrating them along the way with our, vitamin D and our antimicrobials and our chelation and, all of that. So I'm not a purist, and there are people out there, I'm totally in honor of, that can just heal with energy alone. But, for the modern time and modern terrain, I feel like we need that, integration. And that's, the new integrative medicine, right? Biofield science with, functional or bioregulatory medicine.
No, it's incredibly exciting that you have that combination, because you really are attacking an issue at multiple initiation points. Yeah. And I think all issues really do start on an energetic or even vibration. Tesla said it the best, that if you want to learn the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Like he knew it. He was one of the smartest minds. And I'm sure Einstein, Pop, George Lakhovsky, they would all agree. And these are some of the most prominent scientific minds of the last 100 years. We're just a little bit slow, I think, to adopt it in medicine, which is normal. I think, it took Newtonian principles, a couple hundred years to really be adopted by medicine and start applying those. So I think we're just ahead of the curve, but it will get there. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of looking at energy medicine and some of the therapies you're utilizing, what are some of the ones you've seen great things? Because there's so much out there, right? And that's the cool thing too, but it also becomes a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people, or people just getting in, whether or not this works and that works and this EMF protection, and and thinking you could just sit in a Faraday cage all day and protect yourself from EMF without understanding that we need certain waves from the earth as well as cosmic waves. So there's still, like, I think it's so fresh and new, and there's so much flooding kind of the market to be like, oh, I can help you with this energy and block this energy. What are the ones you're looking at, excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share a couple of my favorite tools, and just also being very cognizant that, we have, everybody has access to this, a lot of these things at no cost as well. Just, again, you and I both see people who are pretty sick and need, these extraordinary tools to support them. And I think also, like, we're in the modern terrain, right? And, it's really expensive and really, you have to be very educated to be very healthy right now in our society. And I hope that changes, right? But it's just where we are. So I'll kind of give you, both ends of the spectrum there. So in my office, we have a couple, a number of different tools. But one, we'll start with light. So the light equipment that I have in my office is the Weber Medical Technology. I don't know if you have that in your office, but I
love Dr. Weber. I'm actually speaking with him next week about the helmet, because we had the IV laser and the laser watch, and that's been great. And now we're applying the helmet for depression. So completely on board with that. Yeah.
Dr. Weber, they just had a great conference in San Diego. And
that's right.
He's a brilliant doctor and a brilliant innovator, and he developed this equipment that is different wavelengths of laser light, and they can be applied different ways. So you can use it intravenously, interstitially, interarticularly, if you're out of our country, into tumors. And this idea of not just photobiomodulation, so different wavelengths of light having biochemical effects in the body. There's this idea of photodynamic therapy. And so photodynamic therapy, I think, is brilliant. And it's this idea that when you apply a photosensitizer, which you can take internally, topically, intravenously, and there are different substances. So, for example, let's say like methylene blue. So that is a pigment. It's a blue pigment and has all of these amazing properties in the body. And when it gets taken in by cells, it responds. It's basically photoactivated by red light or 660 nanometer light. So it's this idea, this integration of physical substances with their peak spectrum absorption to get a more potent effect in the body. And it can stimulate either apoptosis for cancer cells or increased reactive oxygen species to kill different pathogens inside the cell. So that's super exciting. And as you mentioned, they have a watch. They just updated their watch. And so it's going to even be more powerful, which is awesome. So that idea with the watch is that you're applying light to the radial artery, and then the blood that's passing by is absorbing these different photons of light for different physical effects. We have the helmet, and that's red and infrared, and then infrared can penetrate into the bone through the skull and get into the brain for, just to access the brain. The brain's really hard to access with other tools. So that's really exciting. So we use light, and that's my main light tool. We do use sound, and there's two aspects to sound therapy. One is my good friend, Kelly Kennedy, introduced me to this man, Rasmus Berghausen. Do you know him? You should know him. I'll introduce you. He's Austrian, and he studied with Emoto. So Dr. Emoto, who's the water guy, right? He figured out how intention can impact, basically the structure of water. And when you think that we're mostly water, right? We can just think about all of the health effects of how we can affect the water in our body. And he developed an equipment called the Sound of Soul. So basically, it measures your heart rate variability, and it can monitor and basically change different music that basically interacts with your heart rate variability. So it's basically converting your heart rate variability into music and light. So basically, you're bathing in the sound and light of the music of your heart. So it's very heart opening, which is really exciting. And then I've been using the AO scan. Lauren Swenson introduced me to that. That's his company, Solex. And he has a really impactful story. He adopted a child who had cerebral palsy and recovered him through energy medicine. So we traveled all over the world and found, this technology. And it's based on different resonant frequencies. So it has all of that. But the sound part is called inner voice. And you talk into the technology, and the technology can read where you have too high of tones or too low of tones. And then it basically gives you balancing music to balance those basically out of range tones. And then the trippy thing about it is they've studied this, and they found that different patterns and algorithms of out of balance correspond to different subconscious emotions. So we're basically working on the unconscious part of us, through music. And so, I think music has a huge ability to help release, trauma in the field and in our tissues and, in our system. So that's sound. And then, with frequency, I also, again, use the AO scan. I have the BioWell, which is the gas discharge visualization that looks at the biofield. We also have Ness, Harry Massey equipment. I'm starting to use that more and more. And then I'm actually part of the company Free Medica. I was introduced to that equipment with Stephen Davis. He has a story through his daughter, and he helped heal her on her Lyme journey with this technology that basically, to keep it very simple, gives a protocol through light and frequency applied to the body. And they are coming out with a wearable technology where you can basically have a wearable frequency that you can download different packages. That I've been working with Dr. Lee Aaron Keneally and Dr. Rob Cass on creating packages for like stress, anxiety, sleep. And, again, these will be delivered in the form of frequency. So and there are going to be so many more tools. I know Harry's coming out with one, and it's going to be like different supplements. There's just going to be all this different frequency technology, which is really super exciting. So those are, a lot of different equipment that I have in the office. I also have something called the Flow Presso, which is, the lymphatics are a huge part of the work we do. And it uses compression, infrared, and they call it nano vibrational technology. So it's like a PEMF-like technology to add. Basically energy to increase cell voltage. So those are different things. And then I do, muscle testing. I work with a different team of doctors. I work with a chiropractor too, who also studied with Goodhart, and she's really good structurally, but also can read the emotions in the body and the energetics in that way. And then we have a wonderful referral network that, you just, for the you just sense, timing what people need outside of what you offer, and whether it's, different, more intense therapies or different, referrals who can work, with like body code or emotion code or EMDR or, all of these different things. So it's, very integrated approach, and, it's not cookie cutter. I mean, that would make our job way easier, right? If everybody got the same thing and it all worked. So it's a very dynamic process with each patient on figuring out what they need and how to support them to really help them get better.
I've realized that as you add more, it's not just about adding the pieces, it's about becoming an artist and being skilled with how you apply them. And I think that's where people sometimes, I know we used to give, talks to practitioners, and my father would lead a lot of the seminars, and they would always want to just know, what technology should I buy? And that was it. They didn't want to know beyond it. It'll tell me what to do, right? But the truth of the matter is, to be a skilled integrative practitioner means being an artist, means being able to personalize to each person and tap into the patient's intelligence with things like muscle testing and other types of evaluations or EAVs, whatever it is. But it still requires you to do the work, to not just sit there and be a technician. And that's what I love, what I hear, what you're putting out there. You're saying, hey, I want more tools in my toolkit, and that's great, but I also want to apply it in a very tailored way where each patient receives their own protocol that gets them back to complete health of body, mind, and spirit. And I think that's where a lot of medicine, I'm not going to say has gone wrong, because I think that application is just how much of medicine approach things is protocol driven.
Right.
So what's your diagnosis? Put your hand on this, or let's see your labs. And then I know the protocol based off of general kind of, things out there. Do you think as we go along that this idea of personalized medicine will translate to something that is truly tailored to each patient and apply energetic medicine and all these tools? Or do you think we're just so far advanced that this is still like 100 years out? Because I've spoken to some doctors, and they came in and looked around our clinic. They're just like, no, this is still like, you got to wait a couple 100 years before this goes mainstream.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. And I think, as I tune into it, I think that we are, we're pioneering and bringing this information to the forefront. And because of, another kind of like quantum physics principle is a collective network of observers determines reality. And I think there's enough of us, if we use this collective energy and come together, that we can actually we can accelerate the acceptance of this model. And, I don't know about you, but people usually come to us not because it's their first stop, right? They come to us because they've tried a lot of things and been to Mayo and Cleveland and, this and that. And not to say we have all the answers, but we serve a huge patient population that doesn't fit in that conventional model. And I think with the trajectory, especially after the last 2 years of what's happened to people's bodies and health and all of that, we're going to be forced to have more tools, and we're going to have to get more and more creative. And I think that to help people unwind some of whether it's long haulers or reactions or choices that we're going to have to use extraordinary efforts to help unwind that in the physical body. And I think a lot of the answers lie within this realm. And so I think that people like us and our colleagues in our community, plus the times we're in, that there will be an acceleration of the acceptance of this form of medicine. So I feel more optimistic than like 100 years, because I think there's just a lot of things coming together to really there's a huge opportunity if humanity chooses and if our society chooses to bring this to the forefront. I think in this decade.
I agree with you. And here's why I think it's that way. It's for two reasons. Number one, necessity. We have now, 60, 70, pushing on almost, I've heard some doctors say 80% of us are chronically ill. Some of us don't even know it. We just walk around with just parasites and things in us and are constantly fatigued, but just don't actually get a diagnosis. But we probably would if we went in and actually got a good one. So that would be number one, because you can't have a functioning society near 100% chronically ill. That's just impossible. Right. And number two is results. This is what I've always said is that, we don't bring anyone in here for the reason of just, I think trying it. I think a lot of times you end up, but also you want to see results. A lot of what goes on here is out of pocket, insurance doesn't cover and things like that. And a lot of it is on you too, as I'm sure the responsibility is for you to change your lifestyle, you to do the work. We just served as little catalysts to give you these tools, but all those hours outside the doctor's office are more important. And if we didn't have the results in the face of complex chronic conditions, then it wouldn't mean as much. Then we would just be where most of conventional medicine is, which is let's just manage this disease and you live with it. And we'll give you another pill if another symptom comes up. So I think with those two, necessity and results, I do think those are the catalysts, because I've seen it over the last 2 years. I don't know about you, but more people are saying, hey, I'm susceptible having comorbidities. I'm susceptible not being well here. This is the first time I've really took a look at this and said, these pills I'm taking, this doesn't suddenly make me less susceptible. It puts me at a higher risk. I want to address it, and I'm not doing it with the old way. What is a different path? What's a new way? I need to start researching this and seeing what's out there and talking to other people that have experienced this. And that we always say, we don't really market ourselves that much. We use the patients market us. If they go tell their friends, hey, I got better after 20 years of Lyme, that's an amazing proof of concept in a sense. So I think for those two reasons, we will see this becoming more and more prominent and very soon. And one of the ways I know it's prominent, it's going on, mainstream kind of networks. And one of those networks that I know about is Dave Asprey's podcast, which I saw you talking about ozone on and was very happy to see that. And I know you use a machine, the EBO2, correct?
Yeah. I don't have one in my office yet, but I refer to a dear friend in LA. And it's one of the, I think it's one of the most exciting therapies I think that we have right now to address all of, what I call the modern terrain, right? Like what, we say Lyme, we say all these things, which of course are very much part of the story, but, it's in the backdrop of, all of the things that, we're up against, from interference fields and toxicants and, disrupted circadian biology and, imbalances in our microbiomes and ecosystem and trauma, all of that, right? That's all what we're treating, right? And so, I got EBO2. I like to, experiment on myself, as, many of us do. And so I went to my friend's office earlier this year, and it's a very elegant treatment in that it takes your blood, it goes through a filter, and there needs to be more research, but what we're assuming and what we know that the filter basically filters out beta-2 microglobulin, which is an inflammatory protein, also different inflammatory compounds, heavy metals and mycotoxins and other, probably like microplastics and probably spike protein, who knows, things are, of that nature. Then it ozonates the blood. And then combining biophysics, the blood comes back to your body going through what we call a photonic sleeve, which is red light and or UV light. So, we do that in different ways, but it's, part of the treatment. So it's, I think a really, again, elegant treatment for accelerating detoxification and kind of offloading inflammation in the body and, some of the probably like biotoxin, mycotoxin related things. In Europe, they have a stronger filtration device. I'm have some referrals in Switzerland in this clinic called Alpstein, and they have this device called ionospheresis that came out of the Ionis Center out of Germany. Dr. Straub invented this. He's a nephrologist and toxicologist to basically develop this system that is, again, a blood filtration, but it's going to be stronger. They use these specific filters from Japan that are filtering very specifically, heavy metals, pesticides, what gets extracted out of the blood they measure, and it's called an LUOT. And there's this IGL Labs. I have a one patient in particular who recently did this, who's over in Switzerland, and he showed the before and afters, and it's incredible what comes out of the blood, and how good he's feeling after this treatment. So, I think again, our biophysics and the things, the energy medicine. And then, I think in every clinic that we need some blood filtration, equipment, given, that, we're, basically overwhelmed with toxicants from preconception at this time.
Totally. And, the way I saw it, we just purchased the unit and we're awaiting its delivery. Yeah. So I was excited about, because we've been doing major autohemotherapy and then rectal insufflation, ozone, right? UVB, all the oxidative therapies are wonderful. It's just, how could you actually keep advancing it a little bit?
Next step, we and ozone and 10 pass. And so this though is, definitely, and again, everyone's going to need different things at different times. It's a really great tool to integrate into the, the clinical model. So no, I'm so glad that you're going to, have that. So you'll be excited to see what happens, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything to progress results. And again, everything's personalized, but the idea, it's a natural approach, right? And that filtration is basically like helping your liver out. Livers are already overtaxed. All our organs of elimination are completely taxed. As you mentioned, so many toxins out there constantly. Even if you're, trying to be as healthy as possible, you're just exposed. It's in the air. It's in, all materials we wear, like no matter what. So I think it's a wonderful, especially if you're ill, it's a wonderful addition to add that blood filtration, ozonate the blood, have that antimicrobial effect that we so many need, because we all have different microbes in us and pathogens. So yeah, I'm excited to see that. Another thing I was excited to read about and I want to learn more about is the EECO methodology. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm sure you get this a lot. Like people ask, what do you do? How do you treat people with your approach? And so that was just a kind of framework that I distilled to really communicate my thought process and how I develop protocols. And so it's really the combination of really everything we just talked about, with the first E standing for environment and terrain. So very much looking at, I'm a terrain person, right? So looking at how do we strengthen the terrain, reduce the environmental burden, support, the microbiomes in the body, the immune system. And then the second E is all about energy systems. So this is the biofield, and this are biofield therapies, and understanding that we are, wired this way, and to bring in integrate tools of energetic in nature. And then C is clearing the blocks. So a big part of my role is looking at interference fields, and I'm sure you do this as well. And interference fields are this idea that came out of bioregulatory medicine that, the body is always, working to self-regulate and heal. And if when we have an illness, there's something interfering that capacity, that regulation, that communication within not only the autonomic nervous system, but I think the fascia and the biofield as well. And so we look at scars, we look at focal infections, and often in our patients, the tonsils and the sinuses are focal infections, and then the mouth, right? So the mouth is a huge part of our work. And We work a lot with biological dentists that, are very well trained to look at toxicity from, of course, amalgam fillings, root canals, cavitation. So, all of that, is very much still a part of our work. And I think that that's catching on more, but there's still more education that needs to happen, around interference fields, because I think it still gets quite missed in the chronic illness population. And then the O is all about optimizing flow and drainage. So as we've talked about, we're only as healthy as our body can eliminate, right? So we have to really, any protocol that I create, we're always thinking about supporting organs of elimination, supporting the lymphatics. The lymphatics are a huge part of our work. And again, still very much overlooked and even in the chronic illness community. So not only, if you take a couple things away from this lecture, of course, the biofield and energy or energetic nature, but if you're still struggling out there thinking about interference fields, and are you really having enough tools to support your lymphatic system? Because the lymphatic system is our waste clearance system. It's where our immune system also mounts how they respond to what it needs to mount. And even if you're thin, you can have a congested lymphatic system, and it's a body-wide network. So if there's congestion in one area, it can affect drainage in another area. And we need the whole system to be flowing for our brain to drain, our gut to drain, all of our extremities, breast health for women, even reproductive health. So I think that's still, unfortunately, I know you address it, but I think it's still very much overlooked, and it's very rewarding to treat, because when people haven't been addressing their lymphatics and you get that going, that's when they get a lot more movement in the body. So that's my framework. And it's not linear. It's kind of all at once. All of my protocols have those buckets addressed when we're coming up with a plan for a patient.
No, it's great because it's comprehensive again, and it's looking at all the root cause and trying to address them in a personalized and tailored way, which is again where medicine needs to go. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way about that, right? Everyone has their own way. We use bioresonance a lot, some HRV, we use BioWell, all these other things as well. And it gives us the picture, and then you can personalize off of that and get into that, whether lymphatic stagnation is there, whether emotional issues, energetic, past traumas, all of that needs to be addressed. So Dr. Schaffner, I know you got to run soon, but as we wrap this up, what are 3 things you'd recommend for listeners to do to live a healthier and more optimized life, if you could boil it down to 3?
3, only 3. Oh,
I know. I love these questions when I get them, because I'm like, geez, I got like 33.
I know I could go a lot of different directions, but just helping anyone who's listening, just to make this more, more and more accessible, right? So I definitely think the first one would develop a gratitude practice. So I mentioned in this conversation about the power of the heart, right? And I think when we look at a lot of illnesses, they're diseases of the heart, energetic, emotional, electromagnetic, neurological. We have a huge nervous system connection in our heart, and gratitude through the work of Dr. Roland McCready and Heart Math, really is a profound practice in the body, and it can help change our state very quickly. And when we're sick, when life isn't going our way, it can be sometimes the hardest thing to get in that state. But I invite people who are listening to just start their day with 3 things they're grateful for. So that would be one. And then piggybacked on that, if you can sit in the chair a little longer, I would really encourage this idea of meditation in your life. I have been profoundly impacted within my own life, within my patient's life, being inspired again by the work of Joe Dispenza, that when we get in these consistent states of really opening our heart, which creates a connection to our brain. And so that our brain and our heart are in what we call a coherent state that helps to connect us to basically have a more coherent biofield. And then in my visualization of all of this is that we're more in touch with what we call the unified field, which is the fabric that connects all life. And when we're connected with that, we can access that for unlimited potential for healing in our body. But that's also, I think, where the magic of life happens, and we can start really creating and bringing events and synchronicities into our life to help us live, and experience. I think a big part of being here on the planet is seeing how we can create, life. So really, I challenge you to start with gratitude, try to, dispensa meditations can be long, but he has even like a morning one that's only 24 minutes. So hopefully you have 24 minutes to, definitely connect. And, I, again, just as much as I'm recommending all the treatment modalities and supplements, I'm really trying to bring this in the forefront in my patient protocols. And then I think the last thing that we all know the impact of nature on our bodies. And I think, we're so wired right now. We're so, in these often, what makes people sick is a toxic indoor environment. So really, getting out, especially in the morning, if you can, and getting the light of the sunrise in our brains through the our eyes, that has a huge impact on our circadian biology. And if you're in a place where you can put your feet on the ground and getting those electrons, in our connective tissue to deal with all the stressors in the day, to help regulate inflammation and have those electron reservoirs through grounding would be really important. So again, those would be, everyone has access to gratitude, closing their eyes and being quiet and getting out into nature. So I would recommend those three things since I'm only limited to three things right now.
Well, thank you. And I'm incredibly grateful for that answer because I agree with it. I think those are three kind of overlooked pieces that so few of us actually implement during our day, and they're free. People always say, hey, it's really expensive to be healthy. Have you ever gone to Whole Foods, whole check, right? I can't shop there. I got other things to do, right? Yeah. So, I always say, start with these. These are simple. Writing down three things and truly feeling gratitude in the morning is a few minutes. Even if you can't just start with a meditation of 5 minutes of just breathing and just sitting alone and taking in breath and just focusing on that and clearing the mind, and to literally just get outside. I mean, I do this in the morning where I just, after I make some water with lemon and apple cider vinegar, I just go outside and I kick off. It doesn't matter if it's cold or hot. I kick off the sandals or whatever and just put my feet on the ground for a few minutes. And all of that is free, and it actually is incredibly beneficial. Yeah, we often overlook it, but I think, those three, if applied, those are the foundation for health. So great answers. Where can people learn more about you and kind of find your work?
Oh, thank you. So I have a website. It's just my name, drchristineschaffner.com. I have a podcast as well. I have to have you on it. It's called The Spectrum of Health. So you can find information about that. And then my clinic is in Seattle, so the other coast. It's called Imminence Health. And so we do all the things. And we also have an office in California, and we do a lot of telemedicine as well. So those are all the places you can find me.
Amazing. I got to stop by there next time I'm on the West Coast. It's been a little while since I've been to Seattle, but I had my co-founder went to naturopathic school, NCNM in Portland. So I know I used to visit them a lot and do hiking, and I'd go up into Washington sometimes too and do a beautiful area. Pacific Northwest is gorgeous. So
come visit.
Absolutely.
Right. You have to go to another person's clinic to get treated, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. You can't do it at your own. I've been saying it. I'm still getting over a flu. You can probably hear I'm a little congested. And I just don't want to take up my clinic's time to do treatment. Like I'm that kind of person, like patients first and everything. So even though I should, I'm going at it the natural way of I'm going to get outside right now, and then I'm going to do some gratitude practice to get over this. But
Dr. The EBO2 on you, because get the EBO2 treatment, you'll feel good.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that and having that delivered. But Dr. Schaffner, thank you so much for this. Looking forward to seeing everything you do from here on. And this has been great.
Oh, well, thank you for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun having this conversation.